skilled veteran bass fisherman must admit that he's lost a good fish because a knot he tied failed at a real critical fish fighting moment. Good quality knots are the result of careful preparation by fishermen who have learned to properly tie their knot and develop their tying skills. Knots generally are the weakest part of any kind of fishing system. Tying a good knot is the most important thing that you can learn to ensure a really good day's fishing success. As a rule, knots weaken line. Therefore, your line's no stronger than the knot that you yourself tie. Because nylon fishing line is smooth and has a self-lubricating surface, special knots are required to prevent slipping and pulling out. Some fishermen think that knots look really complicated, so they settle for an inferior knot can cut their line strength considerably. In fact, the common used fisherman's knot, or clinch knot, can cut line strength by 50%. An overhand knot will also cut line strength about in half. The smart fisherman knows that the right knot, if he ties it correctly, can really prevent losing fish, sometimes really big fish. However, when the proper knot is used for a specific angling situation, and the knot's tied correctly, the fisherman can fight a fish to the limits of his tackle, and he can know that everything's going to hold and he's going to catch that big fish. Knot strength is really a big problem in braided lines. The main problem being that not so much of the line cutting itself, but it's so slick that it slips, and it's real hard to get a good knot in a lot of braided line. In fact, some fishermen have even gone to using super glue on their line to try to hold their knots. You really don't need to do that. Over the years, reliable knots have been developed for specific purposes. Some knots are used to connect line to terminal tackle, secure your line to your reel, to join two fishing lines together, or to form a loop knot. Now, a loop knot will give you great action on a lot of lures. Every fisherman should understand when and where to use each one of these knots and be able to tie all of them really well. The average fisherman knows one, maybe two different kind of knots. But with this little tool, the FAS-N-AIDER, you'll be tying knots like a pro in just about any given fishing situation. Let's visit with my good friend Dwayne Colby, who owns the FAS-N-AIDER, and we're going to show you several knots that you can use in just about any kind of fishing situation that you encounter. First of all, Dwayne, show me just how quickly you can tie a knot. Tie that Roadrunner on real quick for me. Show you just how fast it can be done.
I'm not going to go real quick for you, but because then you won't even know what happens. But this is probably quick enough. You want me to cut it also?
Yeah, go ahead and cut the end off there. That's real fast right there. And that is an excellent, excellent knot. And you can see how quickly it's done. Okay, now do that again a little bit slower so people can see what you're doing, and explain what kind of knot you're tying right there.
All right. First of all, it's a uni-knot's what we're tying. It's not a clinch knot, and we've got a little clip right here. If you notice, the eye of your hook goes in there, so it automatically centers it up with this little funnel right here. So windy days, that line goes right through that eye.
Another thing that's great about the funnel that I was going to point out is if you can't see real good, and I've got bifocals in the bottom of my sunglasses, if you can't see real good, you don't have to worry about hitting that little bitty eye that Joe puts on those baits.
I did notice that, but I didn't want to mention that.
I understand.
You know. Some people are a little offended, so. And then you've got this little point, that's also an eye cleaner, cleans the paint out of the
If you won't talk about my bad eyes, I won't talk about your hair.
Well, all right. Just keep that.
Go ahead, Dwayne, I'm sorry.
So I've made all my wraps here. We're not twisting the line, and my line is trapped there. Instead of running my tag line through all the loops, I'm going to pull this trigger. Now my loops are free to go over the tag line. And they'll fall right in place if you notice. They line right up. You should always wet your knot right there, cinch it down. Take your extra line, place it right here in this little slot, push your thumb, and that trims it off. Just cut one line.
Extremely easy, quick, good knot to tie.
Exactly.
Now that particular knot, as well as a bunch of the others, are in the little book that comes with the FAS-N-AIDER, and in fact that knot is right here in the front. We call that a modified uni knot. And let's just go through here, and let me just turn the page here and let's see what we've got. We showed how to tie that knot. Let's just go over here and go and see what else we want to tie.
We got, okay, we call this the Colby uni knot for the people that been tying the trilene, the Palomar, that like to go in the eye twice. Make 3 to 5 wraps just like the first time. Instead of going to the eye cleaner at this point, this is when we go in the eye the second time.
Back through the eye of the bait twice,
instead of doubling it up right off the back like normal. We make all our wraps and then go in there. Our tag line's trapped, trim the excess off. That way the loops just have to go over that short line. And if you notice, we're right through the center of all the loops. We're in the eye twice.
Wet that and then cinch it on up.
And watch how pretty that thing lays down. That's a knot that most people have never seen before. Unlike the trilene and all that cuts across there and like a clinch knot, they cut down on themselves. This goes through all the loops, as we show here on the little book right on the front page there. You notice that we're going through all the loops versus a clinch knot, it cuts down on itself.
Here's one of my favorites. This is a knot that I've showed people to tie for years, a Jimmy Houston loop knot. And I gave you a challenge 2 or 3 years ago and said, you know, let's see you tie the loop knot with the FAS-N-AIDER. And the loop knot allows you to have a loop on your lure, so the lure gets a lot of action. Something like a Zara spook or a minnow type bait or even a roadrunner a lot of times, or a jig, I like to have a loop.
Well, and a lot of people, they don't know what you're talking about on a loop knot, I found, until you actually show them, like the knot that slides all the way down, the Palomar clinch knot, this uni knot. As soon as you hit the brush, that knot slides around that eye, and now look how that roadrunner's hanging.
Right.
And we all know that they should be like that.
Right, absolutely.
So that loop allows it to hang the way it should, providing that the lure is made correctly and got the proper balance to it already. I really prefer this knot. It's very consistent on its strength. I'm really amazed at this knot. I've even tied straight hooks on with that loop knot. I don't need the action on a straight hook, but that knot is so consistent on strength, because sometimes I may not wet the knot like I should, and this knot still is very strong. I'm going to thread about 12 inches of line through there, just bring it to my chest and hook it. I'm going to force both lines under the eye cleaner. Just let them hang. Relax your finger and just flip those over. Figure 8.
Over the bait.
Snug it down. Just get it off the hook right there. That's about right. That's the size loop I like. Rule of thumb is you don't want a big enough loop that this lure can get back through. Just wet that, of course. Snug it down there. Let her hang and just keep your finger back there. Keep that other line out. And, you've got all the action you need and the strength.
And the bait will hang correctly. The bait will hang up and down as opposed to hanging, you know, straight up and down. It's hanging the way you want it to hang for the maximum amount of action. All right, show me the Jimmy Houston knot, the knot that I use on spinner baits and on split rings and on things when I want a knot cinched down, which is a double knot, a pure 100% knot. It works extremely good. As a matter of fact, tie it on this spinner bait with some braided line.
Okay.
Show me some braided line here, because braided line is extremely difficult to tie to.
So I'm just doubled my line and lay my 2 lines across the funnel right here. Just lay them in there. You notice I got a tag line under my thumb and the main line. So I've got this loop right here hanging, and just let this lure seesaw on there. I like the lure out of my way. You don't have to pull it up here tight, but you need about 6, 8 inches up there, and just hold each wrap with your finger. 3 to 4 wraps. Trap this little loop underneath the eye cleaner. That's trapped. My thumb always stays in place. Nothing will happen until I pull that trigger. That lets my loops go over that tag line. I just went through the center of every loop, snug that down, and you've got 3 lines to cut, as you well know on this knot. Just cut you one there, and then I just take these 2.
It's amazing the way that cuts the braided line. Braided line's really hard to cut.
Right,
you can't cut it with fingernail
making special scissors to cut that stuff.
Yeah,
so
that works great.
You've got a lot of tools here, more than meets the eye on this thing. I didn't really show you this little point is also to clean out the paint on your jig eyes.
Which happens a lot with a lot of jigs. Yeah. What about tying 2 lines together? We can tie 2 lines together with a FAS-N-AIDER, which is one of the neatest tricks I think we've ever developed with it.
Yeah, we can we'll tie a piece of this braided to the monofilament.
And this is a trick I've never seen anybody be able to do, is tie braided line to the monofilament line.
Take your 10 and 12-inch piece of your monofilament to start with.
Okay, now you went through your eye just like you would normally.
This eye, if you notice, it's just a slot. It's a slotted funnel, so I'm literally just laying it down in there. You don't have to thread it. You just lay it in there. Just leave that out there. And you're just going to take this monofilament, hook it on the trigger. So you don't get caught up in that line, I'll use my finger there just to hold each wrap. And I wrapped it loose this time, and that left this little gap between the trigger and the knot tire. Now I'm going to pull the trigger and just pull the loops right onto the braided. Just leave it at that point right there. So I've got that right now. So all I'm going to do is reverse all of this. I'm going to do the same thing, only opposite. I'm going to take my braided,
slide it in the funnel.
And slide it in the funnel. Even if that other line goes in there, that's fine.
Doesn't make any difference.
Here's my other knot right here, if you notice. I've got to keep it back behind me. Make my wraps, and I run my tag line right between my loops, almost a little short there. Pull the trigger and just let that lay out there. Don't tighten these down yet. You want to hold this braided here and the monofilament here so that you can pull these together.
You need to wet this.
You need to wet it.
And then slide them together.
And then you just slide both lines together, just like so.
Okay, Dwayne, let's do a snelled hook. This is a snelled hook. It's extremely popular, you know, using for crappie fishing, white bass, catfishing. But they're expensive. They're expensive because they're kind of labor intensive. All you got is a hook and some line, but you got the loop in the end, you got the snell around the hook down here, so they're kind of expensive. Show me how you can build one for no more than the cost of a hook and line.
Okay, first we're going to make a loop in the line.
Do the snell.
So I just take a paper clip. Basically, I'm putting it in there just for a visual so that I have something to see to flip my loops over. So I'm going to thread it through there, 10, 12 inches of line. Hook the line with your finger and just make one wrap is all you do. You're forcing both lines under the eye cleaner and leave that alone. Flip that over, that's your figure 8. Your knot's tied right there, but you want a small loop. You just snug it down about to the point of the knot tires, just about right. It's double lined in the knot, snug it down, of course wet it. Slide it off of the paper
that gives
clip.
us our loop that we've got in one end. All right, now
Nice,
how about snelling on the hook on the other end?
Okay.
And go over and make it, you know, 8 or 10 inches or so.
Okay, I'm going to trim my excess
And you can make
off.
this any length, you know, you don't have to worry about what you get from the store. You can make this any length.
Yeah, you're limited a lot of times in the stores with what length of leader you can get. And also you need to purchase the turn down eyes. That's what
That will keep your line straight
keeps your
going down
line
against
straight
the hook.
with the shank, exactly. Otherwise it'll kink itself and you're actually not tying a very good knot if you use a regular hook. So you want about an 8-inch one? That's about right. Loosely, if you notice that trigger moves, see? So I'm just making loose wraps. I'm putting my extra right between that gap right there. Just pull the trigger and just work these loops right over onto the shank because you got little barbs on that particular hook. Snug it down.
Now it's right down on the hook. And all you got to do then is just cut this little tag off.
Pull that all the way up. Don't worry about that hook getting in there. Just, I always put my finger back here. That keeps some other line out and just cut it off. That's pretty quick.
Now you have a snelled hook, real quickly made, and about 10 or 15% of the cost is you went and bought that at the store. The FAS-N-AIDER is an extremely neat little product. It is so easy for anybody to tie really, really good knots. My little grandson can tie a knot with this. As a matter of fact, the kids love to tie knots with the FAS-N-AIDERs. It kind of makes knot tying fun. And I don't know how your kids and grandkids do fishing, but now mine like to tie on a lure, the one in the box that looks most like a frog or a perch or something like that. They like to make about 4 casts and say, Granddad, they're not biting this. They like to tie on another one. And so generally, you know, I have to do that. But with the FAS-N-AIDER, just let them retie it themselves and they can go through every lure in the box. In fact, I found that most kids can go through about 50 lures in about 300 casts maximum. And that's about a half a day's fishing for them. You can tie cold weather with your gloves on. Some of you that might be getting up my age and whether your eyes have gone bad or not, you can't see quite as good to hit the eye on those little holes. Your fingers may not be operating quite like they used to. Some people have arthritis and have a hard time handling fishing line. I know people have stopped fishing because they can't handle fishing line very well because their fingers just don't work as well as they used to. You can tie a knot with a FAS-N-AIDER with gloves on. It's one of the neatest little tools to come along. Thousands and thousands and thousands of fishermen have been using them all over the country. It is a neat item and it does one thing that really, really is important. It makes that part between you and the fish whole. And I guarantee you that's important to me.